Place of the African American performers who inspired Zulu's blackface tradition can help us to understand Zulu both then and now. In 1909, blackface minstrelsy was widely enjoyed by racist whites. It allowed them to feel simultaneously comfortable in their racism and excited by the prospect of voyeurism into black culture, which is why parading in blackface likely had a protective effect for the first Zulu marchers and riders, because it was a radical thing for a group of working-class black people to parade openly in New Orleans. Had they done so in a way that explicitly challenged white racist stereotypes of the time, they might have been met with violence, incarceration for violating segregation statutes, or simply have been barred from participation altogether. We certainly know that other groups who tried to mask in more explicitly pro-black or pro-indigenous ways, like Black Indians, or recently renamed Mardi Gras Indians, were not at all beloved by the white public at the time, and they often encountered violence, sanctions, and arrests at Mardi Gras.
It's important to say that the early members of Zulu were not uniquely racist or self-deprecating for their time. Their attitudes toward blackface towards Africa would have been common, though not universal. Blackface was also the most popular Mardi Gras costume among whites at the time of Zulu's founding. In 1872, the Louisiana Republican newspaper states that an estimated 3/4 of whites at Mardi Gras appeared as irrepressible plantation hands. The same newspaper had 2 years earlier complained that the lack of imagination in costuming at Carnival could be concluded by the astonishing numbers of Ethiopian minstrels. In 1901, the Times-Picayune complains that whites seemed not to tire of masking in blackface at Carnival, and that they were under the impression that they could enjoy more license as Negroes. It is important to note that Mardi Gras was essentially a citywide blackface party for white New Orleanians in the time leading up to Zulu's founding. Zulu only decided to swim with the current of local white supremacist practice, but they did not invent it. It is the fact that the same tradition persists largely unchanged into our time that calls for much closer examination. If we now acknowledge the toxicity and real harm that blackface minstrelsy caused Black America with its stereotypes of black life, it's hard to take Zulu as an exception to the rule just because they have been at it for 110 years. When our traditions no longer serve us, then they must evolve, and that is why Taking Down NOLA is insisting on having this difficult conversation. It's not because we do not understand or respect the complicated history laid out here, but because we always have the choice to keep the parts of a tradition that serve us in the present and discard the ones that don't. There are many parts of the Zulu founding mythology that can serve as a basis for what the club might look like in a future beyond blackface. Pride in the black working class and solidarity with it, the quest to honor the African cultural roots that were whipped, beaten, and Bible-thumped away from enslaved ancestors, the desire to revel in blackness in a city often hostile to its own black residents. These things could be the future of Zulu if the club is courageous enough to change.
How we feeling, my peoples? Good. All right, so I just want to acknowledge that we just took a whole lot of knowledge and information in, much of which can be enlightening and mind expanding, heart expanding, all those good things, is also toxic inherently because it's toxic elements of our history and our past. So I want to revisit that space that Bonnie just took us to. Those two highs not going to be nearly as elegantly curated, but nonetheless, I think we could do some breathing. All right. So feel free to put your hands in whatever mudra, whatever form you like to take. I like to put mine something like this. Close your eyes. And I want us to first inhale for all of the information that you just took in, everything that you just took in, from the good to the bad and the ugly and everything in between. I want you to take it all the way in, and as you release, I want you to release of it what does not serve you and retain that which does serve you. Inhale. We're going to do another collective breath. I want you to take this one in for all of the ancestors, namely Sissierda Jones and many of those who went through this struggle and who went through things that they never should have had to, just to be able to transmit our brilliance, our greatness, our spirit in some kind of way. And I want you to inhale her brilliance and exhale all the toxicity that she had to lack on her face, literally, just to survive in that world back then. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. With this next breath, I want you to think about going from the personal to the macro. We're going to come back to the micro. I want you to think about in your own personal bloodline, in your own family, in your own community, the ways in which some of these toxic ways have been internalized. Read a beautiful article by Sister Mama Fire, who's come to some of these meetings before. And she talked about how some of these things live inside of our bodies and how it's an obstacle in our healing. As someone who spears the True Love movement, it's all about the healing of our people. We know that we can't get to that healing when we have all of these elements, these symbols that represent systems of dehumanization of our people. It lives inside our bodies. It lived inside my classroom for a decade when I be trying to teach my youngins about black power, black history, black healing. Like I hear the black, your mama black, black this, that jokes as I'm trying to teach them this kind of stuff. Literally, those symbols live in our bodies and our psyches. The youngest got it in their bodies and their veins, don't even know where it came from. So we still have a lot of healing to do. I want you to inhale in your own personal ways in which you've seen white supremacist symbolism and systemic oppression internalized in your body and in your families and in your communities. Feel what you feel as you take that breath in and then release it. 1, 2, 3. We're going to take one more breath, 2 more actually, but this one last one, oriented towards healing. I want you to take this one in for the city of New Orleans. We in a festival, carnival season. Everybody turn it up to our left and our right. The mayhem, the pandemonium is all around us. And it is our people's way quite often of not only reifying traditions that go all the way back to West Africa that we have every right to practice and participate in. However, it's quite often our way of detracting or distracting ourselves away from the sickness that we're forced to subsist through, that we have to live with every day. So we want to take a breath in for our brothers and sisters who are not in this room right now in their physicality, but here in their spirits, and they're all around the city, and they're with us every day. Let's take a breath for our people, inhaling for all of their struggle, and exhaling for all that we will collectively release as we take off the symbolic oppression and the systemic oppression that comes with 1, 2, 3. This last breath, y'all can open your eyes for this one. In yoga, we call this lion's breath. All right? We understand that after we've done a lot of the healing work inside of our own bodies, right, it's going to require a courage, because I love how Bonner framed it earlier. This is not just about your own internal, personal tuning up of your spiritual engine and getting ready and healed in that way, but we're inherently in a fight. And a fight is a part of life. All right? That was even before colonization and white supremacy. There's going to be a part where there's resistance and friction and tension around the truths that you manifest and bring into the world. And especially when we know that we are diametrically opposed with the system that's been created on our ancestors' backs and still works against our peoples, right? So in the spirit of that, we know that we got to breathe out some fire too, right? We got to take some of that fire energy in, and we're going to exhale it out collectively to manifest collective courage. We call this a lion's breath. You're going to bring that breath for 3, hold it for a minute, and when it comes out, I want you to try to focus at the top of your eyebrows, right in the middle where your third eye is. Might make you look a little cross-eyed, but that's crazy. That's all right. All right? And y'all can watch me model it real quick. All right? So you will let that tongue hang out your mouth like a lion and manifest that fire energy on a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. I see. Good.
All right. Thank you, Brother Quest, and all the distinguished guests in the building today. I'm up here to kind of just to curate the conversation. I can say that I'm a lifelong resident of New Orleans. Grew up right there in Boscoville, behind Dillard Hill. My grandpa used to take me to the library. There was the third black people on the block, and I was reported because they were intentionally the third. They didn't want to deal with all the BS that the first two dealt with. People throwing bricks in the window, fire and stuff on the lawn, just for them wanting to live. In a decent little neighborhood and everything of that nature. And so I say that to say that was in the 60s. They got the house. My mama grew up there, my uncle, me, my other, siblings and cousins and everybody. And now me as an educator, as a teacher, here in the city, other youth, I can't even afford a house back there. The homes, because of the gentrification. Like when I was coming up, I was the white boy. I was the closest thing to white. I'm light bright down there white and whatnot. And because as you had the white flight in the 60s, all the white folks moving to St. Tammany Parish, Chalmette, Slidell, all the little outskirts of New Orleans, and they don't want to be around here. The black folks coming in, now the game and flip, and now New Orleans popping again, and all the descendants and their children coming back into these neighborhoods, and it's pricing us out. You know what I'm saying? And so just let that resonate with you. The fact of the matter, you got an educator, in there trying to do right, can't even afford a home back there. But with that said, like what Quest was saying about what's putting our head, like realize that when you talk about white supremacy, you talk about the fact of the matter that you're going to keep the body and take the mind. And so as our African, ancestors were taken from us, something else was put in place. And, that something else looks like what the blackface is and what Zulu continues to perpetuate, and also like with that said, think about what it is that makes rich white folks feel comfortable. Whenever they feel too comfortable about something, that should tell you something. You know what I'm saying? Like they had a problem with somebody taking a knee against putting up the Black Power fist, during the anthem and whatnot. So that was problematic. So that should tell you something. But the blackface, Zulu, the King of Corner, this and that, ain't got no problem with that. That should like be an instant clue. Whenever like the rich ruling white class ain't got no problem with a mass contingency of black people doing something, that should let you know that, something wrong with it. And so with that said, we just wanted to kind of guide some of the questions. We got a couple of guests in the building that we wanted to get at. And let's see, if y'all wanted to, we got Mama Greer in the building, we got Brother Chuck, we got Brother Willie Muhammad, and I guess I'll just like kick it off with throwing the questions at y'all, and y'all can then respond. We want it to be an organic give and take here. So the first question being, what was the catalyst? Y'all can stay in y'all seats, stand up, whatever makes you feel most comfortable. What was the catalyst to bring you to the conclusion to move beyond blackface? And whoever wants to take it first, you want to let sister go first? You want to take it?
Go fast. I'm working on a body of work. It's untitled, but it's basically surrounding art and identity. Of course, it's my opinions. It's based on my opinions and my life experiences. So, the catalyst. First, I have to talk about my life. That was the catalyst. I'm born and raised in New Orleans. I'd like to say that I was capably educated in New Orleans in the lower ninth ward. So when people talk about not being exposed to or not having black history and not being taught certain things, I think that my experience, my educational experience is an exception. That in fact, in that lower ninth ward, at Alfred Lawless Elementary and Junior High School, I had the opportunity and luxury and privilege to have revolutionary teachers. Although it wasn't categorized or compartmentalized or sanctioned black history education, we nonetheless received it. So when people start talking about Congo Square and this, that, and the other, in fact, we already had it. When people were talking about Lee Circle, in fact, I remember being put on a bus, and I remember those instructors driving us around the city of New Orleans to all of these sites in New Orleans, especially those statues, and pointing out, this is this, So this is what you need to do. You need to not do this. You need to not do this. This represents this, that, this, and the other. So I'm a child of the 60s, and I want to thank those teachers for that. I grew up with the mantra, be a credit to your race every day until I was ninth grade. After graduating from ninth grade, I was a victim of the black brain drain. So I didn't hear it from high school on, but from kindergarten through ninth grade, I heard that every day. I grew up in a neighborhood where you could walk to St. Claude and see the parades. Carnival was on Claiborne Avenue before I-10, and the destruction of a neighborhood where we lost 300 black businesses. In popular culture, I grew up during a time where we were supplied with and subject to the Brady Bunch and Tarzan reruns. And if you're looking at the relationship of black people during that period with the machinations, the political machinations of the civil rights era, you're now in an area where you can't be separated, but there is an arm's distance between you and the white people. They're not really dealing with you. You're not really trying to deal with them. They're throwing beads at you for us on the ground, for us to scramble over. Somewhere around 10 years old, I decided I didn't want anybody to throw me anything, black or white. And I folded my arms and I didn't care. And especially because I'm coming home after carnival season, and a week later my mother's throwing all that trash away. Throw it away, carnival's over, I don't want the trinkets in the house. So we can talk about blackface, but it involves more than that. So with that is the flambeau carriers. So I present at scholarly conferences around the world, and recently I heard some dancers talk about the flambeau carriers being a wide African tradition, and it's not for me to question, it wasn't my conference. And what I remember is if you called anybody's father or brother or uncle a flambeau carrier, that was a fight, right? Those men were, I don't even have to explain that, but they all used that I'm going to use this money to do whatever else, and that's what they were. My favorite story is one day we're sitting in the Desire Project for a minute. My parents separated, and my mother lived in the Desire Project, and we lived there, and then my father, they were reconciling. And this carnival, my brother came home, and someone had called my parents and said, hey, Sonny's a flambeau carrier. And the parents said, go in the room, the bedroom. So we all go in the bedroom. We don't know what's happening. And they waited for him. And they waited for him, and they took the money, and they beat him because he was not going to embarrass the family. So how that becomes a great African tradition, I don't know. So now let's talk about Zulu, and this is where it's going to, I'll be quick here.